Hi, welcome to the Quantum Canine Show. I'm Tricia Selbach. This is Kevin Behan.
Good morning.
And today we're going to talk about energy and grounding energy in dogs. And I thought what we could do is we could very simply outline your theory, your energy system. We've been talking about how you don't see what dogs do as part of a dominance hierarchy or as part of positive reinforcement, but rather an energy system that's based on how a wolf interacts with its prey.
In the case of dogs, right?
In the case of dogs. And that there's actually an energy system that's running the whole game, but we somehow don't see it.
Right.
So maybe you could just outline that energy system very basically for us.
Well, I should say that anytime we use the word energy, and you'll notice the word energy is being used a lot these days.
Right.
But as soon as we use the word energy, we've actually thrown out everything. We've actually gone from an ancient idea like the Earth is the center of the universe. It's as if we went from geocentricity to, what's the word, heliocentricity? When the sun is
that would make sense, yeah.
You can't just add the idea of energy into the mix and go on as business as usual, because you would then have to assume that if there is such a thing as energy, that it were completely random and that it's the brain that brings it into form and shapes it. You wouldn't be able to say that energy has inherent properties and principles of movement. So as soon as you hear people saying, my dog picks up my energy or the energy in this place, you've actually, whether you know it or not, thrown out everything you think you believe about nature and let in a new paradigm. And my job is to make that, well, what is that paradigm? So there is order and structure to the way energy works, and because we don't know any other language, we say, well, that must be a dominant hierarchy. That's the most logical thing in the way our mind processes data.
So how does energy, what is the system that in the way in which energy moves with dogs?
Well, energy always goes to ground. Just like electricity goes downhill, electrons go to ground, the most stable state. So if you look again at what dogs are doing, it's very obvious to see energy is always going to ground. And the behavioral manifestation of grounding is an act of ingestion, be it smell. The most primal form would be smell and gripping with the mouth and tasting. You can also ingest visually. I mean, we've all heard the word eye candy. I mean, why would you say a word like eye candy? That's because we're visually ingesting. And sensually, you can feel very magnetic to someone and feel grounded by being just in their proximity without even touching them. So those are more rarefied social expressions, but the simplest expressions are the simple act of ingestion, which is why we feel received, for example, when we go to someone's house and they offer us food and drink. I mean, you would think as advanced social beings, we could just go to people's homes for scintillating human conversation.
Right.
But if they don't offer you food and drink, you don't feel received. And if you look at all our festivals, it all revolves around food. So it's this elemental act of grounding that makes us feel received and safe. So you give a child, for example, you give her a stuffed toy at night. She can squeeze it and hug it and grip. Now, by the way, our hands are the equivalent of jaws in a dog, which is why dogs are really interested in our hands, just as they are in each other's jaws. So a child likes to squeeze a toy to feel grounded, i.e. safe. Groundedness and safe are synonymous.
So let's go back to the original model that we were talking about when we imagine a wolf on a tundra looking at, a group of buffalo or whatever, and one of them vibrates.
That's okay. So that's ungrounded energy.
So that's ungrounded energy. Energy that gives the wolf the green light to move.
Right.
Energy is moving, and the way to ground that energy is to bite.
Grab it, right? Yes.
Right, and then what I've noticed that's interesting is after they've killed moose, they just go right back to all the pack behavior.
Yeah, as soon as you're in a moment of stasis. So group energy is dynamic, it's flowing, movement.
Right.
Pack energy is stasis, stagnant. And that's all about balance. And any disruption of balance threatens everybody. And that's where you get all the noise and the ba-ba-ba-ba-boom and all the stress. So if nature were a perfect balance, it would be dead dying.
Right, it would be just a static
Stagnant.
system.
Yeah.
Right.
So nature is never a perfect balance, which is kind of cool. The Hopi Indian always put a little asymmetrical flaw in any creation they made because it shouldn't be perfect. There should be a flaw. That flaw, by the way, is how new energy gets into the system. digress philosophically for a
Right.
moment. So anyway, if we look at what dogs are doing, they're always grounding. Always, always, always have to feel grounded for that moment. So anytime they reconnect with the ground, that's a new moment. And that's their perception of the passage of energy, time/time. They don't have a linear view of time. They have one moment. A moment can be a millisecond in a nervous dog. A moment can be days long for a calm dog that's properly channeled.
Okay, so we were talking about when dogs are playing, they're getting energy moving. But when the energy moves, they need to ground it because...
They need to feel grounded into each other to feel safe to let this energy move.
I see. So it has to be...
Energy has to be grounded to be safe.
I see, just like in your house.
Just like in your house, you walk in and you smell arcing electrical in the wires, you know right away, uh-oh, ungrounded energy, danger. Interestingly, you know, coyotes in the plains will stamp out lightning fires. Now, they're not trying to put out the fire. They're trying to ground
the energy.
the sparkling, ungrounded energy.
So maybe we could show a clip of an example of this.
Well, we
energy
have, I
system.
believe, Pablo and Kuzi to follow through on what we were showing last time. And we'll see how they've been around each other all morning. And here's a whole nother moment where we separated them from a distance. So we're going to let them come to opposite handlers. And they're going to go through each other's energy field. And as they get closer, they become aware of each other. And they got to stop and ground. They check each other out. Kuzi took a smell. Pablo went, oops, and took a little furtive smell. And they grounded. And now they can go on about their way. So there was such a change in their perception as they went through each other's field that energy had to be grounded. So if you see dogs playing and the game gets a little rough, they stop, they smell, they reacquire the contact, ground, then they resume to play again.
So to keep it safe.
To keep it safe. Now there's no logical reason for them to do that. If they're checking us, that their status changed in the last 5 minutes.
Is that what the dominant hierarchy would say?
Yeah, the dominant hierarchy says smelling is they're checking out internal status. What did you eat? What did this and that? I mean, they make up all these reasons, but that makes absolutely no sense. By the way, why does a dog check his own poop? He turns around and smells his own defecation. Is he checking up on his status? Like, what's
Right.
what's in my inbox? You know,
Right.
what has my status changed unbeknownst to me? Nobody's around. The reason is that a dog doesn't know the difference between this internal movement of energy because of a biological process and the internal movement of emotion due to some object of attraction moving and making him feel movement, which I haven't fleshed that out yet, but when something moves out there, a dog feels his emotion move within. I can get very specific of that. He does not, so when he has a bowel movement, that's exactly the same as an emotional movement.
It just feels like a movement to him.
It feels
Right.
just as if somebody touched him, so he turns around and says, what was that? And he doesn't get any charge out of his own poop, so he just dismisses it and goes on. But he is grounded. That movement in his body just got grounded. That's energy, and he just grounded it to his own elimination, which makes no logical sense whatsoever.
So how, as dog owners, what can we do to ground our dog's energy? Because it would seem like, you know, that would create a lot more trust and safe feelings for the dog.
Well, that's what we do so much ungroundedness. We yell at dogs, we interrupt the flow, and we don't give them people are kind of getting it with they give them an acceptable toy. They take something away and they give them something. That's kind of it. Not quite it, but it's kind of, so in some ways with the cookie it's a grounding. So if you use the food specifically for grounding and increase how much energy that'll neutralize, that's a logical energy system in my view. But if you're using to reward food just for rewards, that's a mental system, and sometimes that food is not going to be a strong enough ground. So that's why if you see in the video I show the dog pushing into me, so I become a really strong ground lightning rod for 200 miles per hour energy, full energization.
So Hessian comes tearing off the rock,
Right.
pushes into you, and
Right.
you ground that
and
energy.
I ground. I offer resistance, and then he overpowers it. He gets the food. So now that food is worth 200,000 volts worth of grounding.
So he feels good.
He feels great.
He feels safe.
And I become the ground when he sees 200. Now there's only one energy. It works by flow, volume, voltage. So if there's 200,000, if the deer can trigger 200,000 volts in him, and I can satisfy 200,000 volts in him, my dog can now feel me when there's a deer there. And
Or
then
he-
if he can feel me, he can hear me. He can listen to me. And he'll be coming to me to solve the deer problem.
And so that's why you can take Hessian anywhere. You don't
Anywhere.
take him anywhere ever his whole life for 5 years, and then you can take him to Central Park.
Right.
Because he's learned on this energy system.
Right.
It's
There's
not
only one
dependent,
energy.
right,
If you
of-
ground 100% of the energy, the dog is the same. If you can elicit 100% and ground 100%, the dog is the same in every moment. So Hessian lived up in my hillside. You see the fields and this and that. That's all he knew for 6 years. Last fall, I took him to Manhattan to do a demonstration on Madison Avenue. First time I've ever been sidewalks, hotels, lobbies, elevators. I'd teach him at Bryant Park, go to the bathroom under a bush, as close as we could get to grounding, and played with him in Central Park, and he didn't know any difference between there in the middle of nowhere, my house.
which is really different from what a lot of dog owners experience. You take a dog here, they act this way. Take them here, they act that way. They don't behave.
Actually,
they
they
don't listen
think
to
they're
you.
socializing when they're ungrounding. They take the dog to new places and they don't ground the energy. They actually taught them a bad social lesson. Whereas
So-
if they just taught them grounding, then you are actually socializing your puppy through the grounding phenomenon.
And then they can go anywhere and be
Then
social.
you can take them anywhere, right? So when I took Hessian, we got out of the car in the garage, underground garage below the hotel. I got him out of the toy, out of the car. I showed him the toy. He pushed in for the toy. He bit the toy. He carried the toy. He gave me the toy. He barked for the toy. All right, Hessian's here. We're done. And that was
Right.
it for the rest of the weekend. He was just like he was around my house.
No
No
different.
difference. And from his perspective, it was no different because he could express full energy. So if you go to a place the first time, you'll notice you're constrained. And after a couple of days, you start to feel comfortable and you start to act. Your energy starts to move. You feel normal.
You act more like yourself.
Right.
Whereas in the beginning, you're just really
Right.
quiet.
But we don't want that lag time. Now, we're intellectual, so we could feel constrained, and we're not going to read any ill impute in those around us. We just know, well, I don't feel comfortable here. We can tell ourselves stuff, but the dog can't do that. He just knows the moment. So if he has to hold back energy, that's because there must be a predator around. And now his brain instinctually will make up a predator to justify the release of this held back energy.
Anything like a guy with a hat.
A guy with a
or,
hat,
yeah,
as a car backfire,
Right.
anything. And then the dog is, now you got a problem.
So for dog owners, you need to try to, if you work on this energy system, you ground their energy, then you've solved all the problems
That's
before
right.
they even come
There's
up.
only one problem to solve. What to do with the dog's energy. It always must run to ground. And I teach dog owners how to become that ground. And that should be the basis of all obedience training. I don't do high-tech obedience training. It doesn't really interest me, other than the police dog work I did. That was interesting. But I don't care about trick dog training. I just care about that grounding. And then you can do all the trick dog training you want to do on top of that. That's fine. But what's really important is the foundation.
So how do you get a dog to ground its energy? What
Well,
does
like
that
I
look
say, the first primal circuit is ingestion. You know, if you have a little scared child, what's the first thing you do with a scared child? You get them in your house, you give them ice cream.
Right.
Eat some ice cream.
Right.
And the kid starts to feel safe.
Okay.
You know, you don't give him broccoli, too much resistance.
Right.
You give him ice cream. He starts to feel safe. So the active ingestion is grounding. And that, of course, you know, a neuroscientist says, oh, you're releasing endorphins and so on and so forth. But that's supplemental. That's incidental to the real act of ingestion.
So the first act that the dog owner can use is just to feed the dog, is what you're saying?
Yes,
Or-
but overcoming resistance to ground the higher voltages. So if a dog sees a deer and you give him a cookie, well, the deer's 200,000 volts, the cookie's 50 volts, the dog is going to start to feel a disequilibrium. So you're actually correcting him for coming to you for the cookie. All right? So if your dog won't push in for 200,000 volts, then that's not feeling like a deer. Because there's only one energy. I like to give this example. If you look at the Vermont State Lottery and you win the $1 million payoff, that's 200,000 volts of gratification.
Right.
But for some arcane accounting reason, the New Hampshire Gaming Commission sends you the 200,000 volts of payoff. Do you care?
No, of course
No.
not.
So you're attracted to Montpelier. You're looking at Montpelier. There's 200,000 volts of excitation. And the 200,000 volts of gratification comes from Concord, the opposite direction. You don't care. So your dog can see a deer here, but if he feels gratification there, and it is exactly the same energy statement, he doesn't care.
So that's
Another thing I like to tell you, if a wolf is tracking the elk and it leads them back to the herd Now, he smells the spoor of the elk. He gets 200,000 volts of arousal, and he gets to the herd. Does he care which elk he got?
No, of
No.
course not.
As a matter of fact, he's never going to get that elk. That's probably a healthy elk. He's going to look for the young one or the weak one. He doesn't care. They don't, after the hunt, say, geez, guys, we let that elk get away.
Right.
You know, mission not accomplished. So he's going to, if 200,000 volts got grounded, case closed.
Well, that brings me back a little bit to something my father-in-law said. He said, I think people are uncomfortable thinking that their dogs are predators and that they have to act prey-like, but you're saying you need to satisfy that prey drive.
Well, you know, our emotions, emotion is the universal operating system of animal consciousness, the human animal as well. So that goes back to archetypal judgment. Use a word like predator. Oh, that's danger, too much danger. Too much energy equals danger. So we gonna have, now the other way you could say predator is the projector of energy. The other way you could say prey is the absorber of energy. And what hopefully will mollify people's concern is if you're the absorber of energy, you have emotional leverage if you know how to parlay it, which, by the way, most putty cats learn how to do. The dog projects into them, predator to prey, and the cat, because it has its own predator projector capability, can bounce it right back at the dog, and because he's so much prey energy, he's right into the nervous core of the dog. And whatever if he spits, the dog goes, sorry. He totally controls that dog by virtue of being the object of attraction, but having enough predator horsepower to bounce it right back at the dog and control the dog.
So a lot of our problems, our modern problems with dogs, is that we are afraid of energy, and so we can't really absorb it because we're afraid of it.
Yeah, if we become the object of attraction, we get scared.
And
When we actually have our maximum thing, I can remember as a boy learning how to feed the dogs with my dad. I was 8, 9, 10 years old. We had a commercial family dog kennel of 100 dogs, and I would mix up the food. My first job in the kennel was mix up all the gruel, 100 pounds of kibble and meat and sauce and whatever, and I'd hit the button, the latch, open the door, and take the cart into the main aisle. And these dogs came flying at their gates, and I thought they were going to eat me. I ran away and hid in the kitchen. My father had to come and no, they just want the food. I found that incomprehensible that they wanted their food. So he showed me he scooped out the bowl and he held it back. The dog was sitting. He put the bowl in. The dog would wait. Now he can have it. So by being the object of attraction, I actually had power, but it overwhelmed my circuitry as a little boy until I learned how to master it, just like my dad showed me. So by being the object of attraction, when a teacher goes in front of a class, she or he wants to be the object of the kid's attraction. I have something you want. I'll tell you an interesting story, and at the end of class, we'll give you the answer. Does anybody know the answer? The kids they're attracted to that teacher. Therefore, the teacher has maximum leverage. I'm going to shape how you learn here today. So that's really to be the object of attraction. You have to be the prey. You have to absorb the energy. And if you want to increase the pleasure, you got to be able to bounce it back and then absorb it again. You play. So what we were watching the play, that's actually ping pong. Well, we didn't see a very good example of ping pong. It was mostly one-way flow at the moment. But when dogs play really well, they bounce it back and forth. I call that the charge. And they whack it to the next one, and he bounces it right back. And that exchange of energy is new energy for reasons I'm sure we'll get into one day. But at any rate, they're making new energy, and that feels great.
So we're afraid of energy. We don't want to absorb energy, and that's what's. And for puppies, we are the main object of attraction.
Exactly.
Always. But somehow we are that intimidates us. That
Well,
makes us afraid.
every puppy starts out in life with the owner as the most exciting thing on the face of the earth. All right? Just as every little wolf cub starts out with the adult members of the pack, the most exciting things on the face of the earth. They follow them everywhere. But that's not natural to stay in arrested development. If the wolf stayed that way,
right,
he wouldn't go after the moose.
Right, he wouldn't go after the moose.
So our dogs go 6, 7, 8, 10 months, and all of a sudden the deer on the horizon, which they couldn't handle as a puppy, all of a sudden that becomes the most exciting thing on the face of the earth. Now, the owner calls their puppy as a little puppy, and a puppy came to them. They said in their mind, well, my dog came to his name. And I say, no, the dog came to the most exciting thing on the face of the earth, which you happen to be for the first 6 to 1 year of the dog's life. 2 years later, there's the deer. He hears his name. What does the dog do? Go faster to the most exciting thing on the face of the earth. So the dog is disobedient on command. He actually learned that.
We go back to why does the dog run away when it hears its name?
Exactly.
Because we didn't, the dog owner didn't maintain being the most exciting
Right.
thing
He
in
didn't
the
know how to
universe.
become the ground at 200,000 volts, because obviously at 200,000 volts it triggered the archetypal instinct in the human makeup. Too much danger, too much energy equals danger.
So we're going to see a clip of you with Pablo grounding his energy through the
Yeah, so
ground
every
exercise.
behavior, every obedience behavior should feel
Oh, this is
ground.
him grounding the energy.
Well, yeah,
with
here's
the-
a little dog. All dogs are the same. They all have the same prey-predator makeup. So here's the mighty Pablo. All the dog. He can't express his energy directly to the dogs because he's so little. So this is what's really fascinating about canines is they displace it onto an object, and that object can would ultimately become the midpoint. And you see all the other dogs start to orbit Pablo, and there he's got this possession of the object. So he's now at the center of the group, and he's starting to feel that good. And so pretty soon the group will ultimately, left to their own devices, will start to revolve around him. Now the dog going to the water is also a form of grounding.
So Pablo he couldn't act directly on what was
And
going
he can't
on.
ground into them because they're so big, they're moving too fast.
Right.
From his perspective, it's unchanneled energy. He's too little.
So he's got to go down to the ground, pick up the
Yeah,
thing
he
and
displaced
shake
it onto an acceptable prey object, didn't have too much resistance to it.
Yeah, I noticed
And-
before, we didn't see in that clip how he had done that with an apple as well. He couldn't
Yeah.
connect to the bigger dog, so he went over to the apple and he
Right.
was shaking the apple.
And somewhere on our video, we then saw Hessian pick up an apple. And then the game, it was easier. Then Pablo started chasing Hessian because he had an apple in his mouth. So once Hessian was grounded, it was very easy for Pablo to chase him. It was grounded energy now, safe. Okay, now I can make prey on the big dog.
Now, maybe you could explain when you're teaching a thing such as down, what you're teaching the dog is to ground to put their energy right to the ground, right?
Right.
So
Now, every part of the dog can be a ground. The most important parts are the butt, the little brain in the gut, enteric nervous system. Leave that aside. The head, the jaws can be the ground, but also the heart is the other self-contained dynamo in every animal. And it's its own thing. I mean, you take the heart out of the body and put it in a saline solution, it'll keep beating. So it's an amazing thing. So the dog really wants to get his heart grounded. And that's what down should feel like to the dog. He wants to get his heart right to the ground, as close to the ground as he can.
Okay, well, we'll see a clip of Pablo grounding you're helping him ground his heart.
So I have what he wants. And he's afraid being up there. It's ungrounded energy. He's off the ground. So he's a little afraid, but he wants to get right off the box. I'm going to teach him that the box is a safe ground. He's resisting my hand. And if he accepts that, I'm deferring his gratification to the food. First I did it with the food, immediate moment, instantly. And then I'm deferring it. So I'm reminding him of his initial choice to always lay down. And now I'm associating a little leash correction with his choice. We're kind of jumping
Way
ahead of everything. But prior to this, I had done a lot of imprinting with the food so that he just melted to my touch. And now I'm putting more and more energy into the system. There's more energy he could handle, so he popped up. And I'm suppling his body. I'm touching him so he can feel his body again. Because when he gets stuck up in his big head, the big brain in the head, instincts take over. And you can see he doesn't want the food. He's scared, so he won't take the food. So I'm teaching him all my so-called command behaviors are really ways for him to feel safe. I'm reminding him of his initial decision to feel safe by laying down. So he's in a high place, and if he gets really struggling, he goes, doesn't work. I pull on the leash toward the edge, Then I let him get off. Now, see how he's shaking that off? That's getting rid of too much energy. That's more energy than he can handle. That's why dogs shake, is when they're trying to get energy out of the system because they couldn't ground it.
What caused that too much energy? Because he just wouldn't ground it, he wouldn't lay down?
Because he was up high and it was off the ground, so it was scary. And I was introducing new things, such as a little pull on the leash, and I was stamping my feet. So that's more energy than the down could channel. And that's part of training, to keep increasing how much energy can go through his body in the down behavior. So he feels connected via feeling his heart touching that deck.
That's interesting what you're talking about, the heart as a self-contained. A friend of mine who hunts said he got a deer and he put the pile, all the entrails, and he had the heart on top, and he said he'd come back for it later. And he left, and he came back a few hours later, and just the heart was gone.
That's interesting. Well, you know,
Yeah.
the Indians used to eat the heart after the kill.
Right.
You know, the mighty buffalo, if you saw Dance with Wolves, that was a great thing. They knew the heart. The heart is a faculty of intelligence. It's an animal consciousness, is much more important than the brain. And it's interesting, the latest research is unbelievable. People having heart transplants, the memories of the donor are being transferred with them. So there's amazing examples of one man received a heart transplant and he went to thank the wife of the donor who was killed in a car crash. No, he had committed suicide. So he went to thank her. When they met each other, when he met her, he felt like he knew her his whole life. They ultimately married. He ultimately committed suicide.
Oh
That's
my.
not a happy ending.
Oh my God.
Another woman got a heart transplant, and she was a very health-conscious vegetarian even, I think. And by the way, this was chronicled in the New York Daily News. We can log on and I can give you the specific references. But anyhow, she was in her donor was killed in a car crash. She took on this new heart. She had an inexplicable craving for Kentucky Fried Chicken, a complete anathema to her whole ethic, and started eating it. And it turned out he was an addict of Kentucky Fried Chicken. They actually found wrappers in the car the night of the fatal crash.
Wow.
In the wreckage. So.
And you say that dogs, they operate through the world by heart.
Exactly. Heart is the agency of evolution, not the brain. The number one function of the brain is to keep species separate from each other. The number one function of the heart is to weave them together so in their differentiation they make new energy. That is actually what's happening in evolution, not random mutations and as if they're disconnected. You know, Darwin said we're all netted, interconnected, but how? There actually is no mechanism. It's like looking at people going into a bank and saying, well, they're exploiting a universal resource of armed guards milling around a vault.
Right.
But there's no real interconnectedness between them other than they're evolving relative to each other.
Right.
But we do know that an economy sets the value of that money, unbeknownst to
Right.
any of those people. They're all connected via the economy, exchange rates with other nations, inflation, deflation, interest rates, all beyond our immediate moment conscious awareness. And yet it determines everything about the way money's working around.
And you're saying we're all connected by
Heart.
the heart, and that
Yes.
the dogs.
Feel this connection. I call it a world wide web of feeling.
We have another clip.
So if this returns us to the play, we'll see examples of grounding. So Kuzi's trying to ground on a little puppy. He's grounding him. This probably must be the apple. So see, when he looks like a predator at the other dogs, the red light, as you say, is on, and they can't go near him. So when he looks at them, he's projecting energy onto them, and they go away because he doesn't want to be. They can feel he doesn't want contact. He's afraid of them. Now Hessian is making prey just as if she were a deer. The neck bite. One wolf can kill a deer with a neck bite. That's the object of leverage. That's the midpoint. He can't catch a deer, so it's interesting. That's another discussion. But if he were able to catch one by surprise, he could get it by the neck. So when dogs see other dogs, they basically see deer in each other. They're basically deer energy to each other, which is it's very obvious with the shepherd when his tail goes up. You see the white tail, just like a white-tailed deer. And Pablo's trying to get in on it, but his safety is his apple. Because when he has his apple, he can project back into the dogs and repel them, just like a cat does. And he's feeling safe. Now she's trying to connect with Pablo, but Hesh is much more dynamic to her. So now they all want this is what I was alluding to earlier, that the energy, if these dogs lived with each other for a period of time, Pablo would become the leader in the house. He'd be the so-called dominant one. That's why everybody's confused. Well, how come these guys are the leaders outside and then this guy runs the house? So if you have a linear dominant model, you never can make sense of what's happening. Whereas if the prey controls the predator, and little is more prey than big, female more prey than male, cat more prey than canine, then it makes perfect sense in an energy system. Let's see how she's smelling him. Why does she have to smell him? Because she's grounding her attraction to Pablo into Hessian, because she can't go directly to Pablo because he would look at her as a predator would. So that energy has to go somewhere, so she connected it with Hessian. So what's actually happening is all this energy is becoming interconnected. And ultimately, when it's free-flowing, they then will feel that inflection of that network in their heart. And that becomes a faculty of intelligence at that point. And then I believe that everything that happens in the brain and the body becomes a form of information at that rarefied state.
And what do you mean by that?
Well, a secretion of the bile gland, the dog will feel that. He'll feel kidney function. He'll feel his lung function. And that becomes a heightening or lessening of compression and expansion, and that's how he knows whether this is working or not. That's actually how he knows. He'll feel his bodily functions. And that's information about how the other. Now, since all dogs feel exactly those functions the same, it becomes like a universal form of communication.
Like a common language.
Like a common language, so they can make each other feel something. I met someone who was expert in Tai Chi. He told me his master could flex his individual organs, his kidney, his gallbladder. You could put your hand and he could flex it. So he had recaptured that kind of innate animal awareness of his own physical function through the meditative exercises, which they call internal organ massage.
And dogs do that by connecting with each other?
Right. They don't have access to that information unless they connect to each other.
I see.
Then that heart, everything becomes subordinated to the heart at that point.
And can they get it by connecting through us?
Oh, yes,
us as well?
yes. They feel our bodily function too, which is why they get so excited about the cancer mole. And you hear those examples of cancer detection dogs where they worried an owner's mole on the leg. And the owner finally went to the doctor and said, wow, good thing you came in. They cut it off, no problem.
And that's because they're connected to us. Their heart is working as a faculty of intelligence.
Yes.
And
they can feel the disconnections in our own body that manifested as the precancerous mole, prompting them to get at it like it was the vibrating prey animal. It's all one model.
And this all comes from the prey predator.
Yes.
Which
yes.
some people are uncomfortable with, but which
Right.
obviously is saving people's lives when they can detect cancer.
Yeah, if you
and
just reduce
seizures.
if we reduce it to pure energy, predator projects energy. So if you look across the parking lot, you're our predator.
Right.
And you'll notice the animals know that. They're looking at you, they're not going near you.
Right.
Whereas if you vibrate, that's prey. So, for example, people pat their side.
Right.
And they say, hey, doggy, 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 come on, puppy, come on, puppy. They're vibrating like prey.
Right, it's like the broken wing.
The broken wing of the
Right.
rough grouse, and they are attracting the emotion of the dog. They're absorbing his energy. He can come closer.
So our job is to, overcome that fear of energy and
Yes.
emotion as dog owners.
Exactly.
So that's all for today, and we'll be back next month. Thanks for watching.